It was raining, and she, Mario Shiina, was sitting on a swing in the park when Amain Fujimiya first spoke to her. Amain began living alone shortly after entering his first year of high school. An angel lived in the apartment to his right. Of course, angel was a metaphor. Nevertheless, Mario Shiina was so pretty and sweet, and the metaphor really suited her. Her straight, flax-colored hair was well-groomed, smooth and shiny, and her pure white skin was smooth and flawless. She had a beautiful nose, a pair of big eyes under her long eyebrows, and beautiful bright pink lips, and combined with all these features she had a delicate, doll-like beauty. She went to the same school and the same year as Amain. He very often heard others talking about her. Most said she was a smart and athletic girl. In fact, she took first place in every exam they took and also always got high marks in physical education classes. Amain didn't know much about her since they were in different classes, but if the rumors were true, she was nothing short of perfect. She had no obvious flaws. Beautiful face, excellent grades, she was modest and obedient. No wonder she was popular. Some boys would be overjoyed if they had the chance to live near such an ideal. Despite this, Amain wasn't going to do anything with her and didn't think he ever would. Of course, Amain also felt that Mario Shiina was truly fascinating. Even so, they were just neighbors. Amain had never intended to contact her, and he had not yet had a chance to talk to her. If he did anything, he would make the boys jealous. Truth be told, if they could get along just by living next to each other, the boys in love with her wouldn't have to suffer so much. And besides, love was different from mere infatuation with the opposite sex. As for Amain, he thought Mario was a girl more suited to admire her from afar. For this reason, Amain never expected a sweet and sour relationship with her, and he naturally did not expect to have anything to do with her. He simply lived near her, never communicating with her. So when he saw her walking alone without an umbrella in the rain, he wondered, what is she doing here? It was raining so hard that everyone had already scattered to their homes. And yet here she was, alone in the park between the school and the apartment, on the swings. What is she doing in the rain? The sky was covered with thick, dark clouds, and not even a ray of light was shining through, making everything seem gloomy. It had been raining since morning, and he could not see her clearly. But the conspicuous linen-colored hair and the uniform clearly identified Mario. Amain didn't understand why she was here without an umbrella, letting herself get soaked in the rain. She didn't seem to be expecting anyone, and she didn't seem to react in any way to the fact that she was soaking wet. She just stared languidly in a certain direction. Looking up, the face, devoid of color pigments, seemed pale. If she was not careful, she would catch cold. In spite of this, Mario did not move and stayed where she was. She seemed to want it and had no intention of going home. Perhaps it would have been inappropriate for an outsider to voice her concerns. So he thought, about to pass by, but at the last moment he saw her tear-stained face and scratched the back of his head. He had no motive to mess with her at all, but his conscience would be hurt if he left someone looking so miserable. That's all. What are you doing? Amain spoke to her in an aloof voice, showing that he had no ulterior motives. She shook her long hair, which seemed to get heavier because of the water, and looked at him. Her face was as sweet as ever. Even though she was soaked in the rain, her radiance was not impaired and the rain even accentuated her beauty. She was a charming girl soaked in the rain. Her eyes looked at him. At least Mario knew that Amain was her neighbor. After all, they sometimes met in the mornings. But when a stranger came up to her and spoke to her, her caramel-colored eyes became more wary. Fujimiya, do you need anything from me? Wow, she remembered my name, he thought. At the same time, he could tell that this wariness made it impossible to create a favorable atmosphere. They had met before, but they were still strangers. She was expected to be wary after she was approached. She probably didn't want to socialize much with anyone of the opposite sex. As a rule, boys of different ages would confess to her or approach her, and she probably thought they had impure motives. It's not a big deal. It just bothers me that I see you alone in this rain. I see. Thank you for your concern, but I want to stay here for a while longer. Please leave me alone. Her voice was neither shrill nor wary, and though it was gentle, her faint voice also warned him to mind his own business. Well, I guess that's it. Obviously she was hiding something, but Amain wasn't going to investigate further, given how restrained she was. Amain asked her under the influence of the moment. It was only natural that he would do so, though it didn't bother him too much. If she just wants to stay there, he doesn't mind. Mario, in turn, may have wondered why he was talking to her or feeling something like that. She looked skeptically at Amain with her fleeting, beautiful gaze. I see, Amana replied. He felt it wouldn't be good for them to keep talking, so maybe it was time for him to back off. Fortunately for him, whether she had a good impression of him or not, they had no relationship. Amain decided to go home and leave her alone. However, he didn't like leaving the girl alone, soaked in the rain. "You're going to catch cold. Take your umbrella. You don't have to give it back." In the end, Amain decided to be a little more intrusive. If she caught a cold, Amana wouldn't be able to sleep at night. That's what he thought of when he handed her the umbrella. She took the umbrella, or rather, he pushed it toward her. Before she could speak, he turned away. He hurried away, and Mario's words rang out behind him. But his voice was so quiet, and it was just as drowned out by the noise of the rain. He ignored it and walked quickly through the park. He only hoped she wouldn't catch cold when he gave her the umbrella. Perhaps it was for that reason that his guilt at having intended to ignore her had faded a little. Since she refused to talk, Amain did not want to contact her. Since there was nothing between them, it was the end. That's what Amain thought at that moment as he walked back to his house. "Amain, why are you sniffing? Leave me alone." The next day, Amain caught a cold. His classmate, or rather bad friend Itsuki Akazawa, complained about Amain, who was trying to pull the snot back in. Amain wanted to snort back, but couldn't. Instead, he sniffed, trying to breathe through his nose. In a way, he was just snorting. He didn't feel well, his head was splitting, either from pain or a stuffy nose or cold. He took the medicine he bought at the drugstore, but the symptoms did not disappear, but they did not help much. Itsuki looked more dazed than worried. "Didn't you feel good yesterday? Got caught in the rain. Are you okay? Didn't you bring an umbrella yesterday? I lent it to someone." Naturally, he couldn't say he'd lent it to Mario, so he just brushed it off. With a fleeting glance, he noticed that Mario looked fine, much more animated. It was a ridiculous situation, considering that he was the one who handed her the umbrella. But it was his own fault, since he did not immediately take a hot bath to warm his body. But seriously, borrow an umbrella when it's raining so hard. Aren't you being too kind? Not that I had a choice. I just lent it to someone else. And who did you give your umbrella to at the risk of catching a cold? The child who got lost. It was better than talking about someone of childlike stature. In fact, she went to school the same year as him. I see. She had the look of a lost child. Only when he said it did he realize what it was. Then Mario had a look on his face like a lost child looking for his parents. "You're a good guy." Itsuki knew nothing of the full course of events, and just chuckled. "I don't know who you lent your umbrella to, but you just wiped your body and didn't take a shower, right? That's why you got a cold. How do you know? Anyone can say that just by looking at your house. That's why you have a cold, idiot." As soon as he was told off, Amain had to shut up. As Itsuki said, Amain never cared about his own surroundings at home. He never cleaned, and his room was a mess. He usually ate bento or convenience foods bought at convenience stores on the street. And Amain lived alone. Itsuki stared at him dumbfoundedly. It was no surprise to Itsuki that Amain caught a cold when his way of life was so relaxed. "Hurry home and get some rest already. We have a weekend coming up. Get well soon. Yeah. It would be nice if you had a girlfriend who could take care of you. You're too noisy. And you have one, unlike me, so shut up." Itsuki smiled proudly. Amain irritably reached for his napkins. Time passed and Amaner's health deteriorated. His cold symptoms were getting worse. He had a headache and a runny nose, but now they were accompanied by a sore throat and fatigue, destroying his health. After school he headed straight home, but the cold was worse than he thought. His legs got heavy, and it took him longer than usual to get home. In spite of this, he managed to get to the entrance of the apartment complex. Dragging his heavy legs into the elevator, he leaned his whole body against the wall. Har, he found himself breathing even more intermittently than before and his temperature had risen. He somehow managed to tolerate it at school, but he relaxed when he got ready to go home, and his body immediately became heavier. Normally he was fine with the lack of gravity in the elevator, but now it made him uncomfortable. Nevertheless, he was almost home. The elevator stopped on his floor, and he got out slowly, dragging his feet, only to freeze. Before his eyes stood a girl with flaxen hair whom he assumed he would never speak to again. In terms of appearance, her charming face was full of life, her skin looked beautiful. One would have thought she must have been the one with the cold, but there was actually nothing wrong with her. Perhaps it was because she usually took good care of herself that there was such a huge difference between them. In Mario's hands was the neatly folded umbrella he had given her the day before. He had told her not to return it, but she decided to return it anyway. "You didn't have to give it back. But shouldn't I pay back what I once borrowed? She was silent halfway through. You could tell, because she saw Aman's face. Oh, do you have a fever? It has nothing to do with you, right? It came at an inopportune moment, so Aman's eyebrows furrowed. Simply put, it didn't matter if the umbrella was returned. But now was not the right time for them to meet. She was smart and could easily understand why Aman had a cold. But that's because I borrowed an umbrella, that's exactly what I gave it away. It has nothing to do with the case. That's the way it is. I should have caught a cold, but you did. It's not a big deal. You don't have to worry. Aman didn't want others to be bothered just because he did something for his own self-satisfaction. But it appeared that Mario would not leave him alone with just a few words exchanged. Her beautiful face was troubled. That's enough. I'll see you around. Aman was uncomfortable because of the interrogation, so he decided to dodge Mario's questions and worries. Stumbling, he took his umbrella and reached into his pocket for the key. After Amana opened his door, he suddenly lost his strength. He could relax as he finally got ready to enter his house. His body jabbed against the wall behind him. Oh, he thought. The railing in the hallway of the apartment building was sturdy and would withstand his fall. What's more, they were high enough that there was no way he could have gotten himself over and ended up on another floor. A little pain after the fall was to be expected, but that was okay. Aman was about to gather his strength for one last, heroic dash. But someone suddenly picked him up by the arm and he managed to keep his balance. I can't leave it like this. A soft voice penetrated his somewhat weakened consciousness. I will repay you in kind. His mind blurred, probably because of the fever, but he could not understand her words. But before he could do that, Mario dragged Aman's flaccid body away and opened the door. I'll be right in. Sorry for the intrusion. A quiet voice demanded obedience. Aman, struck cold, allowed himself to be dragged without resistance. It was the first time he had ever come home with a girl his own age. Although he didn't have a friend to take care of him while he was sick, it turned out that an angel took care of him instead. Only a few of them he remembered. Because of the heat, Aman had completely forgotten about the situation in his apartment. Or rather, the situation reminded him of itself by presenting itself to him. He lived in a spacious apartment with a huge living room, a bedroom, and a closet, quite a lot for someone who lived alone. After some thought, he decided to live alone. It was his parents who insisted that Aman stay in the apartment. He wanted to be alone, so he agreed. Still, he felt that an apartment of this size was too much for one person to live in. Besides, Aman wasn't the kind of person who liked to clean, and not many guys like to do that sort of thing at all. It went without saying that his apartment was a mess. Oh, what a mess. It's just awful. Despite her pretty appearance, the angel who showed up to help was clearly not economical with harsh words. It was a total disaster. Aman was only bashfully silent. Had he known someone was coming to see him, he probably would have snuck in a little, but it was already too late. Mario only sighed, but instead of turning around and leaving, she dragged Aman into the bedroom. On the way they both almost stumbled. Aman realized, albeit with difficulty, that the apartment needed a general cleaning and, being responsible for this state of affairs, he clearly should have cleaned it in the near future. I'll go out for a minute, and you change your clothes. I hope you can handle that at least. You're not going to leave? I couldn't sleep well if I left you in such a terrible state. Aman remembered that the same thought had crossed his mind when he saw Mario soaking in the rain, so he didn't object. As soon as Mario came out, he started to change. He changed his school uniform to his home clothes. What a mess it is here, not even a foot to step on. How is it possible to live in such an environment? While Aman was changing, he heard indignant grumbling and repented in his mind for his mistake. After changing his clothes, Aman lay down on the bed and immediately fell asleep. When he woke up, he slowly opened his eyes and saw linen hair in front of him. When Aman looked up, he saw Mario standing in front of the bed, apparently staying there the whole time. What time is it? It's 7 p.m. You slept for a couple of hours, Mario replied, and handed him a sports drink as soon as Aman sat down. He emptied the mug gratefully and finally looked around. A few hours of sleep made him feel much better. Then Aman felt something cold on his forehead. He touched it and felt the wet, cold cloth. It was a cooling band-aid, something he was clearly not supposed to have at home. Aman looked questioningly at Mario. I brought it from my house, she explained. Neither the drink nor the cooling patches should be in his home. Apparently, she also brought the drink from her apartment. Thank you for that. You're welcome, she said indifferently, as if it were no big deal. Most likely Mario had taken care of him out of a sense of duty and was clearly not eager to engage in dialogue with him. In any case, she was in the room of a guy she had only recently spoken to, which made it impossible to have any friendly conversation. Bygones. I left the pills on the table. You have to take them after you eat. You hungry? Not much. Okay. I made porridge, so eat it. Did you make it yourself? Who else do you think could have made it? If it doesn't suit me, I can eat it all myself. No, I'll eat. Thank you very much. He was a little excited because he didn't expect her to not only take care of him, but to cook him a meal as well. Truth be told, Amain had no idea how good or bad Mario's cooking was. He'd never heard of her getting bad grades in home economics, so surely she must be a good cook at least. Amain bowed his head, asking a mute question. With an unconcerned look, Mario nodded and handed him the thermometer on the table. I'll go get it, and you take the temperature in the meantime. Okay. Obediently, Amain began unbuttoning his shirt to put the thermometer on. Seeing this, Mario quickly turned away. Would you be so kind as to do that when I get out? Mario's voice sounded a little boisterous. As Amain began unbuttoning her buttons, she flinched and quickly turned away, a slight blush covering her face. It seemed strange to him because it was perfectly normal for guys, unlike girls, to walk around with a naked torso. Mario still refused to turn around. Maybe it was just his imagination, but looking at her ears, Amain saw that they were slightly flushed, which clearly indicated how uncomfortable she felt in this situation. Wow. I think I'm beginning to understand why guys like one another are all so fascinated by her. Amain also thought she was an incredibly beautiful girl, but nothing more. Yes, she was sweet and charming, but he had no feelings for her. Her charm was more like the beauty inherent in a work of art. That was the impression he got as he watched her from a distance. Now, however, something had clearly changed. When Mario began to show emotions such as embarrassment and shame, she began to look more like an ordinary person. It looked strangely charming. Why don't you hurry up and get the porridge then? Amain said monotonously. But because I know you. She answered before she left his room. If they were friends, he certainly wouldn't mind teasing her and pointing out how cute she looked when she was embarrassed. But, given their current relationship, such familiarity was clearly out of place, so he just balked at the idea. Mario was rather hesitant to leave, not because of her current emotional state, but because the room was a mess. Seeing this scene, Amain sighed deeply. He still didn't understand how he had come to this. Yeah, I screwed up, all right. A normal girl in her right mind would never go into a stranger's house to take care of his health. Such an action would lead to unpleasant consequences. And yet, despite the risks, Mario was now standing here helping him recover. She must have felt responsible for making Amain sick, and the fact that he showed no emotion directed at her made the process easier for her. In any case, there is no doubt that Mario only did it because she felt she had to. While such thoughts were occupying his mind, Mario knocked quietly on the door. I brought it. Her hesitation could probably be explained by the fact that she didn't know whether Amain had already dressed. He suddenly remembered that he had unbuttoned his shirt to take his temperature. I'm not done yet. Shouldn't you have finished by now while I was away? Sorry, I got a little distracted. Amain apologized and used the thermometer. After a while there was a sound. Amain glanced at the thermometer, whose display showed 38.3. It wasn't critical, but it wasn't much to be happy about. Amain got dressed properly and said, "Come in." Unhurriedly, Mario entered the room. When she saw that he was dressed, she clearly calmed down. What's with the temperature? 38.3. I'll take my pills, get some sleep, and I'll be fine. They mostly fight the symptoms, not the disease itself. First of all, you need to rest properly. I'm sure you've already destroyed your immune system by living like this. Listening to her rebuke, Amain realized that Mario was just expressing his concern. For some reason he suddenly felt a twinge of remorse. When she had finished reprimanding him, she sighed, then placed the tray with the clay pot on the table and opened the same clay lid. Inside the pot was rice porridge with dried plums. The porridge was liquid, which was just right, considering his condition. It looks like plums were there for a reason, too. They are said to be very useful for diseases. There was no steam coming out of the pot, but it felt warm. This indicated that the porridge had been cooked some time ago and allowed to cool. While Amain stared at the porridge, Mario, ignoring him, poured the porridge onto a plate. It was neatly strewn with slices of plums. There was not a single bone inside, and the red flesh gleamed slightly on the white background of the rice. Here you go. It should be cold by now. Yeah, thanks. Taking his plate, he scooped up the first spoonful and looked at the contents. Mario was slightly surprised by the gesture. What? If you think I have to feed you too, think twice about it. Why would you even think that? No. I was just a little surprised that you can cook. Anyone who lives alone should know how to cook. Amain, who could hardly be classified as this type of person, was struck by these words. Fujimiya, before you start cooking, you should probably start by cleaning up. Yes, you're right. Mario seemed to guess what Amain was thinking at that moment, and continued to stab at his pride. He muttered something to himself, trying to end the conversation as quickly as possible, and decided to take his porridge seriously. Amain scooped up the first spoonful and the taste of the rice spread in his mouth, and thanks to the presence of dried plums, the dish reached a perfect balance of flavor. He wasn't particularly fond of these berries, but the sweet aftertaste against the slightly sour plums was to his liking. If Amain were healthy, he wouldn't mind trying an oat soup with these berries in it. Delicious. Thank you, but even an amateur can make something like that, Mario replied indifferently. But at the same time, a smile flashed across her face. It was a smile of relief that was very different from the one he was used to seeing from her at school. Amain unknowingly held his gaze on her. Fujimiya? Huh? Oh, no, nothing. To his great disappointment, the good-natured smile instantly disappeared from her face. To avoid further development of the subject, Amain continued to eat in silence, as if nothing had happened. Anyway, get plenty of rest and don't forget to drink a lot. You can wipe your sweat with this towel. I'll leave a basin of water next to the bed. Before wiping, remember to wet the towel and then wring it out. After dinner, Mario brought another pack of vitamin drinks, a basin of water, a towel, and cooling patches to his room. Amain had caught her train of thought, because for a girl to stay in someone else's house, and with a guy she didn't even know, was too much to ask. As Amain continued to stare at her, Mario once again made sure he understood. And she's pretty picky for someone who decided to help just out of a sense of duty. Of course, he didn't say it out loud, but Mario always seemed to be so serious about everything. Amain was getting used to her way of speaking, which caused him to have an ironic smile on his face as he listened to her instructions. Well, though I am grateful to her for her help, I don't think our paths will cross again after this. It was highly unlikely that they would ever get back together again. Even today's situation was clearly something out of the ordinary. And since they would never speak again, Amain decided to take the opportunity to satisfy his curiosity. He felt a little tired. The pills were starting to take effect, and the fever was slowly fading. Unlike before Amain had slept, he was now fully aware of what was happening. Oh, by the way, can I ask you something? What specifically? After finishing the last preparations, Mario looked at him. Why were you sitting in the rain? Did you have a fight with your boyfriend? He was still troubled by yesterday, which was the direct cause of the present situation. Why was Mario sitting alone and getting wet because of the rain? At that moment she looked like a lost child. Mario still didn't fully understand why exactly that was what he was thinking. It seemed at that moment that she seemed to be waiting for someone, so Amain suggested that maybe it was about her boyfriend. Mario looked at him perplexed. What? I don't have a boyfriend or desire to have one. Huh? And why is that? Wait a minute. Why do you even think I have a boyfriend? Given your popularity, I figured you must have someone, and maybe more than one. When Amain got a chance to talk to her in such a setting, he realized that despite her serious character and popularity, she was an ordinary girl in front of him. Such an image did not fit the majority opinion at all. Mario was a charming, innocent, modest, and easygoing girl with a graceful figure. She looked like an understated ideal that would make any guy want to protect her. Top grades in school, good at sports and, as Amain recently discovered, great at cooking. Needless to say, she is popular. He happened to see some guys trying to hit on her, and even a few of his classmates had an unhealthy interest in her. Given such popularity and the extensive attention of guys, he could hardly believe that she had no one. Hearing the phrase, "maybe not alone," made Mario very angry. Of course not. Who do you think I am, to date several people at once? That can't happen under any circumstances. Answering his question, Mario's eyes filled with coldness. Amain realized that he had dripped where he shouldn't have. For a moment a shiver ran through his whole body, and the room filled with cold. It was probably due to his cold. Sorry, I didn't mean anything by it. My bad. No, it's okay. I guess I overreacted, too. The moment he apologetically bowed his head, the coldness dissipated. Fortunately, the incident was over, and Amain had no intention of returning to the subject. I was sitting there for another reason. I just needed to gather my thoughts and calm down a little. I'm sorry I made you uncomfortable. I made you sick. It's okay. I got myself into this, so it's not your fault. Anyway, I don't think we'll be crossing paths again, Shiona, Amain said without a second thought. She helped him out of guilt, didn't she? When Mario heard that, she blinked and stared at him incredulously. Had he said something he shouldn't have said again? It looked like he should have explained himself. I mean, it's not like we have anything in common. You're an angel, you might say. You're pretty and have the best grades in the parallel, so I try not to get forgotten. I guess I'm lucky that a girl like you owes me one, huh? Mario looked away, blushing a little. Most likely. Amain's lips curled up against his will in a slight smile. She didn't think much about the answer. Perhaps something similar had happened to her before. Surely there were guys who tried to impose on her, pay attention or do favors in the hope of starting a relationship. It seemed that such situations happened quite often, so it was no surprise that she regarded him with suspicion on that rainy day. She was cautious, and for that he could not blame her. Well, I think the constant signs of attention from guys you don't like is a pain in the ass. It is. There you go. Like I said, right? He was a little surprised to hear confirmation of his hunch. Mario is an honor student, known for her angelic disposition, who has her own preferences and her own problems. In a way, he saw her as a kindred spirit. Mario seemed to have inadvertently said a little more than she wanted to, and, as if to prove it, she stared at Amain, the cause of her chatter, with a look of indignation. That look left behind the last doubts about whether Mario was capable of emotion. It's all right, isn't it? As for me, I was glad to know that angels have problems just like mere mortals. Stop calling me that. Mario glanced at him angrily, trying to hide her embarrassment at the nickname. Seeing her reaction, Amain laughed again. Such unexpected emotion on her face made him excited. Come on, I didn't mean to bother you. Just kidding. With surprise, Mario opened her eyes wide, and then smiled slightly. Lying on the bed and looking up at the ceiling, Amain thought back. When it was time to say goodbye, Mario bowed politely and went to her house. The pills had done their job, but he felt really lousy. It seemed that if he relaxed for a moment, sleep would overtake him. He closed his eyes and began to remember the details of that strange day. Even if he were to tell someone that Angel, as it turned out, not so angelic, that she had been taking care of him all day, no one would believe him anyway. And is it even worth telling anyone about it? Everything that happened today stays between us. Secret. That word alone made his heart feel good. Though it must be admitted that revealing this secret would have been an extremely careless move and would have had unpleasant consequences for his school life. But it wasn't that important. Tomorrow they would be strangers to each other again. At least, that's what he thought, gradually sinking into the shroud of sleep. As expected, Amain and Mario's relationship remained at the level of strangers. The next day he recovered thanks to her help, and happened to run into her at the Minimart. They didn't say a word, but Mario seemed happy to know that Amain was getting better. On Monday, school started again, and everything was back to normal. Nothing new happened, and if anything, Amain became more polite and nodded during greetings. Oh, you look much better, Amain. Thank you for your concern. Itsuki was a little worried about him. Last week when they walked home, Amain's condition was clearly lousy, so today he decided to meet him at the school entrance to make sure everything was okay. At the weekend, Itsuki sent him a short message saying, "Are you alive?" Amain texted back that he was fine, but Itsuki didn't believe it. When he realized that his fears were unfounded, he breathed a sigh of relief, though a little overplaying it. What can I say, given your past condition, even I was beginning to worry. I see you're feeling better now. I hope you can learn from what happened and at least start by cleaning up. And you, too, what? No, nothing. Over the weekend it even got to me. I think I'll get to it in the next few days. No, not in the next few days, but as soon as you get home, Itsuki interrupted sharply, but Amain was no longer listening to him. It's clearly not a case that can be handled in half a day. Amain shook his head, but Itsuki decided not to continue the subject and only added, "See for yourself, it's your apartment. At least make sure there's a place to step when we hang out at your place again." "I'll try." As Amain frowned as he changed his shoes, he heard fussing shouts from the neighboring classroom and involuntarily turned his head toward the noise. When he looked out the window, he saw Mario, radiant as usual, surrounded by her classmates. She smiled calmly in response to their appeals. Calm and collected, she was so different from the image he had seen a few days before. The memory made Amain smile slightly. Itsuki, seeing the expression on his face, looked in the same direction and immediately understood everything as soon as he noticed Mario. Sienna? Huh? Popular as ever. No wonder, considering her beauty. Well, they don't call her an angel for nothing. Wait, do you like her too, Itsuki? Of course, I'm not blind. But my heart is already occupied, so all that remains is to enjoy her beauty. Bragging again. It was about Shito Shirakawa, his girlfriend, whom he affectionately calls Kai. These two were a typical couple at the height of their flower bouquet period. Their mere sight made Amain look away, such a sight was too vivid for his perception. Annoyed by his oddities, Amain waved him off, but Itsuki wasn't the least bit offended. It was all within the bounds of friendly banter. You're completely hopeless, Itsuki laughed. By the way, what about your taste? Isn't she cute? Well, yes, she's beautiful. I'm not blind either. You're boring. What can I say? People like us aren't meant to be with her, so there's no point in trying to do anything about it. All we can do is watch from the sidelines. You're right there. Despite recent events, Amain clearly understood that they were on different levels. He could not imagine himself next to her. She should stay close to outstanding people like herself. In addition, Amain was painfully aware of his own worthlessness. How could anyone put such a gifted beauty and him on the same level? Yes, Amain understood that there was clearly no hope for anything. What are you eating? The unexpected question caught Amain off guard as he stood on the balcony of the apartment building drinking a fruit mixture while looking at the street routine. He was too lazy to go to the nearest store for groceries, so for today he decided to limit himself to a mixture of whatever was left at home from his last trip to the minimarket for food. Before Mario got here, Amain stood on the terrace, leaning against the railing, breathing in the fresh air and drifting off into his own thoughts. When she saw Amain, Mario also leaned against the railing a little away from him. When she saw the mixture in his hand, she frowned slightly. Amain would never have thought that she would suddenly decide to start a dialogue with him and froze in surprise for a while. Oh, here, one packet and you're full of energy again. You're not going to have dinner with her, are you? What else could it be? Isn't that a little too much for a growing body? You're minding your own business again. Usually his diet was not so meager. Most of the time he survived on prepared lunches from the convenience store or snacks from the supermarket. Today, however, he was too bored to cook or go to the store, and he didn't feel like eating instant ramen, so he decided to limit himself to a mix for the day. If he didn't have enough, which he probably would, he still had some goodies left at home. What about cooking? No, you don't have to answer that. I completely forgot who I was talking to. I can't imagine how you survived on your own, not being able to cook or clean. Shut up already. This has nothing to do with you. Another, albeit fair, rebuke caused him to frown and drain the rest of the mixture in one gulp. He had learned his lesson after the cold and was already planning to do some cleaning, but the constant rebukes in that vein clearly did not increase his motivation to do so. What really interested him was why Mario was so grumpy. With a glance back, Mario sighed slightly. I'll be right there. Wait a minute. Amain didn't even have time to respond, and Mario left the terrace and disappeared behind the door of her apartment. What? She asked me to wait. But why? With surprise he looked toward her apartment. As expected, no one answered. That's enough fresh air for today. I guess it's time to go home. Still, Amain decided to wait for her, but the winter evenings were cooler than he thought. Even a sweater didn't help. He himself did not understand why he waited so obediently for her. The temperature had dropped to the point where the exhaled air was turning to steam. Amain exhaled once more and heard the doorbell ring. When he heard it, he rushed to open it. There was only one person who could ring his doorbell at this time of day. Amain had no idea why Mario had come, but, skipping over barricades of piles of fallen clothes and magazines, continued his way to the door. There was clearly no need to look through the peephole. Amain put on his shoes and stepped into the hallway. When he opened the door, as expected, the familiar lilac hair appeared in front of his eyes. What are you doing here? I've seen enough of your irresponsibility. Here are the leftovers from dinner. Mario held out her hands after briefly explaining her reason for coming. In her small hands she held a container. Through the translucent lid she could see the outline of food. The container's contents were still warm, and small droplets could be seen on the lid. Amain blinked several times, trying to comprehend what was happening. Mario, seeing his struggles, sighed heavily. Obviously, you're never going to eat properly. An appetizer is an appetizer, but you have to eat a full meal. Do you want to replace my mother? I don't see anything strange here, and my actions are quite logical. And by the way, shouldn't you have cleaned up your apartment by now? It's still a mess. Mario looked at the space behind him and her eyes narrowed angrily. Such a sight rendered him speechless for a moment. Well, I can still get around just fine, not even close to normal. I've heard that clothes usually shouldn't be lying on the floor. Well, it must have fallen off. And the one that's lying around is already worn out. It won't wear out if it's washed, dried, and folded properly. And pick up those magazines you read already. Didn't you think you could slip on them? Mario seemed angry, but Amain was well aware that she, for some reason unknown to him, was worried about him again. And he had nothing to object to her remarks. The last time she visited Mario, they both almost fell over the mess in his room, so it was no surprise that he was reminded of it again. Gurar, unable to find anything to answer, his face contorted into a grimace. Biting his lip, he took the container from Mario's hands. His palms filled with a warmth that was especially pleasant against this cold weather. So, does that mean I can eat it? If you don't eat it, I'll throw it away. No, 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 I'll eat it. It's not often you get to taste food made by Angel himself. That's enough. I told you not to call me that. In retaliation for her outbursts, Amain turned to Mario again, using her school nickname. The result wasn't long before her pale face turned a little red. Still, calling Mario Angel was extremely embarrassing. As expected, Amain was a little embarrassed when he saw her reaction. The blush on her cheeks and the hurt look on her face caused his lips to part in an involuntary smile. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. If he continued at this rate, it could easily come to a conflict, so he should have stopped. And, among other things, they were not in the kind of relationship where they could make light-hearted jokes about each other, so he shouldn't have gotten carried away. Mario coughed and let it be known that she had moved on from the situation, but she really didn't seem to like being called that. Her blush, however, never disappeared, and her gaze remained almost the same. Well, I'll gladly accept your offering. But seriously, you don't have to worry about me. And I'm not worried at all. I helped you get better that time, so I don't owe you anything else. I'm doing this for myself. But, yes, I am a little concerned about your unhealthy lifestyle. Got it. During their meetings, Amain was constantly in a half-dead state, so Mario's actions were understandable, to some extent. Even now, the part of the apartment that she sees and that she happened to see earlier is a mountain of garbage. There was no use in hiding it. Eat well and live a normal life, okay? Are you turning on your mother again? Amain reacted tiredly in response to another lecture from her. He ended up taking Mario's guest, finding disposable chopsticks bought at the supermarket, and sitting down on the couch in the living room. I wonder what it tastes like. The porridge Mario made last time was delicious. When Amain had a cold, he could hardly taste it. Nevertheless, it was a treat for the sick body. I'm sure it will be delicious this time too, but it was still interesting to compare the sensations. After all, now his taste buds are perfectly fine. Hiding his impatience, Amain opened the container, from which the aroma of homemade food instantly seeped out. Inside, it was chicken along with various vegetables, and the soup had a distinctive color that made it possible to distinguish between carrots and beans. The assortment of dishes was cut in small portions specifically to have enough for a bite. This arrangement only served to whet Amain's appetite, who had made do with a fruit mixture all day. He quickly prepared the sticks and tasted the carrots first. Millimeterhum. Great. Just as he thought, this time the taste was much clearer. As expected from Mario, who has a strong focus on healthy living, the spices were not spicy and the broth was thick. The base of the broth consisted of natural products, not the powder you could buy at the supermarket. It was brewed with tuna shavings and brown seaweed, so its taste was not comparable to powdered substitutes. Amain chewed slowly, savoring the taste of the broth, while the taste of the spices and vegetables spread across his mouth. The taste of fresh vegetables was most clearly felt, while the flavor of the broth remained in the background. Amain wasn't particularly fond of vegetables, but now he was thoroughly enjoying Mario's cooking. It was as if the dish itself was telling him, eat more vegetables. Apart from them, there were small pieces of fresh and soft chicken in the dish. The meat was properly cooked, and there was nothing to complain about, except the small amount. The ingredients themselves were simple to use, and clearly within the reach of a high school student. Nevertheless, much about this dish spoke volumes about her skills, and especially about her experience. Amain thought it would be nice to add some rice along with miso or soy sauce to this dish, but unfortunately, he didn't bother to make it. Or rather, he ran out of rice, so his wish was not destined to come true. It was too late to think or talk about it, but Amain clearly regretted not buying a couple of packets of rice beforehand. Angel is unbelievable, Amain praised the superhuman, brilliant at studying, sports, and economics, but dejected at the mere mention of his nickname. With these thoughts in mind, he continued to enjoy the taste of tonight's dinner. I came to return the container. Thank you, it was incredibly delicious. A day later, Amain paid Mario a visit to return the food container. Amain knew absolutely nothing about housekeeping, but at least he could do the dishes. Decency obliged him to wash the borrowed dishes and return them to the hostess. That was what brought Amain to her door. And Mario seemed to be expecting his visit at this time, so she immediately opened the door without even asking a trivial who. She was dressed in a solid burgundy-colored knit dress. When she opened the door and met Amain's gaze, Mario squinted her eyes. Lowering her gaze, she saw the container. Wow, he washed it. And so well, Mario praised him, the way they usually praise a small child, which, of course, caused a wave of resentment and indignation on his part. Thanks again for your concern. Here you go. Mario took the container and that probably would have been the end of it, however, then she handed him a new one. As expected, there was heat coming from the new container. And inside, it looked like it was roast pork and eggplant. This time the dish was a little cooler than the last time, and there were no drops of water on the lid. Through it he could see the eggplant, the roast meat, and the sesame seeds scattered all over the dish. Judging by the color, the sauce was made of miso, and the lightly charred eggplant and shiny pieces of meat looked very inviting. It looks delicious, he thought. However, he didn't quite understand why she decided to bring him food again. Don't. I just came to return the box. This is tonight's dinner. I can see what it is, but... And yes, just in case. You're not allergic to anything, are you? I'm not going to adjust to your tastes. I don't think so. How did it even get to the point where he was once again accepting dinner from her? Of course, he was very grateful, especially considering his meager diet. Given Mario's high cooking skills, it was likely that the taste of the new dish would be top-notch as well. The only problem was that tragedy would happen if anyone from the school found out about it. A tragedy for his quiet school life, of course. All of the apartments in the apartment building where Amain lived were occupied, but given the size of the place and the neighborhood, the cost of living was not cheap. Apart from Mario, no one from his school lived there, so the chance of anyone noticing them was close to zero, but Amain was still unsure about this issue. I cooked too much for myself. I'd be glad if you'd help me finish it. I'm certainly happy to accept your dinner, but don't you think this kind of action might give others the impression that you like me? Do you really think so? No, not at all. Are you an idiot? Read the unspoken question on her face. Seeing this expression, Amain decided to leave these reflections and not to think about it. Besides, being so perfect, Mario was also concerned about his uselessness in cleaning. In spite of all this, she clearly showed no favoritism toward him. Yes, the situation was a little reminiscent of the typical rom-com template, the charming neighbor cooking dinner for the guy. But there were no romantic feelings between them, and there was certainly no comedy in their relationship. The only expressions of her feelings were rather harsh phrases and pitying glances. Meanwhile, Amain suddenly remembered that he had never bought rice. So there's nothing to worry about. You were going to buy prepared lunches or mediocre snacks at the Minimart anyway, right? What makes you think that? From the look of your kitchen, it looks like it hasn't been used for its intended purpose, plus you've got used disposable sticks from stores everywhere. And your appearance alone speaks for itself. Even your face looks like a dead person. One visit to his apartment was enough for her to see right through it. This fact made Amain's eye twitch slightly. Yes, everything she said was true, and, as usual, he had nothing to counterattack. Well, then I'm off. When she had said and done all she wanted, the door slammed shut, and Mario went back to her place. Then Amain heard the sound of a chain snapping, and there was silence. He stood still for a while, looking at the container in his hands, which still warmed his palms. Finally, he sighed and hurried back to his house. The pork and eggplant was really great, but the lack of rice still tormented his soul. And so, day after day, he came to her and exchanged the empty container for another. This turn of events had a very positive effect on his food intake. Mario's cooking did not have such extensive flavor surpluses, but the dishes were extremely nutritious and very tasty. Realizing the mistakes of the past, Amain also began to prepare a few portions of rice in advance for her dishes. Every day there was a new dish from Japanese, Western, and Chinese cuisine. Each of her meals was a delicacy that was impossible to refuse. Being able to eat such delicacies every day made Amain look forward to a new portion every day. He was a little embarrassed to continue taking advantage of Mario's generosity, but on the other hand, he was already pretty hooked on her cooking, and when he couldn't get another meal, he got discouraged. Apparently, angelic cooking could be very addictive. Amain knew what he was doing was not good, but he could not refuse, and day after day he continued to accept her gifts obediently. "You've been looking a lot better lately. Have you been eating normally?" Itsuki asked during the lunch break. Amain did indeed look more lively as a result of diversifying his diet. As they talked, they sat in the dining room. As they ate their udon, Amain shuddered at Itsuki's insights. "You scare me sometimes, Itsuki." "What, did I hit the bullseye?" "Yes. I mean, no. How should I put it? Every time he met Mario, he was always reprimanded or quipped about something, but given that he got a great dinner from her every time, he had nothing to complain about. His quality of life had clearly improved. Amain wanted to do something to thank the generous angel, but at the same time felt that he might interfere in someone else's business again and only make her uncomfortable and annoyed. In the end, he indirectly confirmed Izuki's conjecture, which caused the latter to burst into a triumphant giggle. "I knew it. After all, your half-dead appearance is the result of your terrible habits. Leave me alone. But you have reformed, haven't you?" "Yeah. I had to. But did your mother do her best?" "Not really. How should I put it? Even though she was much younger, Mario's voice was indeed similar to his mother's. She took care of him all the time, and Amain really began to appreciate it. Tell me, Itsuki, did I really look that awful?" "Yeah. Most of the problem was your pallor. Plus, you're tall and thin, well, your face didn't look healthy. But I always have that face. I know. Although you could express your emotions in a more lively way." "No, thank you. So you're saying my face is half dead?" Looking at himself in the mirror, Amain didn't know what to think. Apparently, in the eyes of others, he looked extremely painful. Maybe that was why Mario was always worrying about him. "I think you should start paying attention to the way others look at you. You're always looking under your feet, it's repulsive. You don't talk to anyone much, and it makes other people feel like you're a fool." "Are you showing off again now?" "Not at all, I'm telling you in all seriousness." Itsuki decided to take the opportunity to tell Amain to pay more attention to his health and appearance, to which he received the standard, "Fuck off, it's none of your business." This time, however, Amain responded by looking away without any indignation on his face or annoyance. Behind Amain's back sounded like a bell. It was a voice that was painfully familiar to him. The strange thing was that Amain was hearing it now, in the supermarket, in the row of snacks. The very fact that they had met was no surprise. What Amain thought was strange was that out of the blue Mario decided to call out to him. He turned around and looked into her big eyes. She was holding a basket of ingredients for tonight's dinner: daikon, tofu, chicken thighs, and milk. Apparently, she was shopping and accidentally stumbled upon it. "Just to be clear, it's just a coincidence. I'm not stalking you. I know. It's the closest supermarket to our house, so it's no surprise." Not expecting such an answer, he had already prepared to explain himself, but Mario paid no attention to it, and just sighed heavily, looking at her notes in her notebook. It was her style to record all her needs on paper. After checking the contents with the notes in her floral notebook, she headed out of the snack department and toward the spice department. "So, soy sauce, Myron," Mario mumbled mockingly as she searched for the right products. She did look pretty damn cute in this situation, but to Amain the scene looked a little unrealistic. "Hey, Myron is right here." "Oh, no, I don't want that one. They don't sell those to minors," Mario said with a shake of her head. "Is there alcohol in it?" "Myron is like a sweet wine. The one with spices and salt cannot be consumed directly, so it is not sold to minors." When she had finished explaining, she took the myrrh and spices and put them in her basket. This was the first time Amain himself had heard about it, which is not surprising, given his involvement, or lack thereof, in the farm. "Wow," he exclaimed in surprise as Mario continued to maneuver gracefully between the racks of merchandise. Then she stopped in front of the soy sauce stand. Looking at the prices, she continued to mutter, frowning her eyebrows, "Special offer. 1 bottle discount for 1 person." Mario glanced in his direction pitifully. It looked like she wanted to buy another one. "Can I take one? Thank you for your understanding." Hearing this, Amain made a satisfied grin and took a bottle of soy sauce from the counter. Mario smiled slightly. "And you're also thrifty. I try my best. We shouldn't spend our money on whatever we can get our hands on." Sounds just like a motto for life. But, yes, you're right. Especially since we're still being supported by our parents. Even though they lived alone, they still depended on them. Amain was born into a wealthy and prosperous family and was able to live in such a luxurious apartment. He also did not have to worry about every yen, for which he was truly grateful to his parents. His expenses included school fees as well as living expenses. Amain might as well have started saving a little, or at least avoiding unnecessary waste. So it is. After all, we're still dependent on them, so it's extremely important to watch our expenses, Mario replied, lowering her head and going through the groceries in her basket. Something had changed in her voice. It was suddenly cold and completely devoid of its usual warmth, and the lines became almost monotone. It was disturbing to see such a change, but when she looked up, her face was the same as before. After a moment, Mario's gaze returned to normal, and the cold was gone. Anyway, what did you get yourself into? She tried to change the subject. In Amain Mario's basket she saw packages of rice and potato salad. Even though Mario's cooking was incredibly delicious, the amount of it was not enough to keep him properly satiated. So, as usual, Amain took rice and salad as supplements to his evening meal. It's for dinner. He took some nasty stuff again. Oh, come on. I got the salad, see? It's potato salad. God, how have you not killed yourself with this lifestyle? I think you're being a little dramatic. Eat more vegetables, Mario's squinting gaze said. Even without words, she continued to pressure him. Eventually Amain turned away and stopped paying attention. While they were talking, he paid for his groceries at the cash register and placed them in bags. Unlike him, Mario put her purchases in a special reusable grocery bag that she had taken with her. Even in such small things she never ceased to amaze him. Amain, however, was a little wary when he saw the amount of her purchases. Milk, soy sauce, and myron all added up to 4 liters. Even considering the varying densities of the liquids, 4 kilograms should certainly be enough. Besides, Mario had a few other foods, of which Dakan would probably be the heaviest. All in all, it was quite a heavy burden. She folded and packed neatly, but it would be hard for her to carry it all home anyway. Besides, she bought so much stuff, including me. It seems that Mario was once again going to cook more than she could handle and share with him. All this time Amain had been getting portions of food from her. She used to say that she cooked too much to be able to handle everything herself, but at least lately, Mario had started to do it deliberately. It seemed that taking care of him had given her some trouble, and to ignore it would not be an act worthy of a man. When Amain saw that Mario had collected all the groceries, he took her bag. It wasn't that heavy for him, but for the girl it was a different matter. Even though Mario was in good shape, her physical strength was another matter. It was safe to assume that she didn't have that much strength in her dainty arms. The gesture made Mario's eyes blink a couple of times. But she looked more grateful than surprised. For the record, I'm not going to steal your stuff. I get it. But I can do it myself, there's not much to it. You know, you'd be even nicer if you'd stop denying it and just let me help. You talk as if I'm not nice at all. Well, compared to the way you behave at school and the way you treat me. Just thinking about it made Mario shudder slightly. No one would dispute that at school she was friendly, kind, and humble, but when she was with Amain, it was as if she became a different person. Indeed, Mario treated him well, but when it came to words she became quite rude. Being around Amain, she never cared about such things as politeness and delicacy. With him she always said what she was thinking. But that didn't bother Amain much. Still, it was better this way than if she was pretending. While Mario was confused, Amain took the opportunity to hurry to the exit, taking her bag with him without further ado. There was a rushing sound behind him, but Amain continued walking, increasing his distance rapidly, not even thinking about slowing down a bit to wait for her. And besides, they were already in the same supermarket, and if anyone saw them coming back together, there wouldn't be much of a consequence. At this point, the distance between them was perfect. Pretending not to know her, Amain continued on his way, keeping his pace. Thank you for your help, he heard a barely perceptible voice behind him.